I think it's obvious that no one wants any Palestinian people to be killed, and certainly not children. But the question is like, who is to blame for their deaths, and how do we avoid more deaths in the future? 99% of Israelis just want to live in peace. If tomorrow you removed all the weapons from Gaza and the West Bank, there would be no more violence. On the other hand, if you removed all weapons from Israel, within a week, there would be no Israel. We would be attacked by all our neighbors, not just Palestinians, and every last Jew would be murdered. In order for there to be peace, the first thing you need is for each side to recognize the other right to exist. 99% of Israelis recognize the Palestinian right to exist and govern themselves, as well, we all know that there are extremists in any society, and that's why it's not 100%. Of course, the prime minister and some decisions from the government primarily relating to settlements haven't helped the peace process, and we fully recognize that. And we can discuss the peace process separately on how Palestinians have rebuffed every attempt Israel has made over the years to find a solution. However, over the past year-ish, you have had hundreds of thousands of Israelis protesting against Netanyahu in the streets. That's because Israel is the only place in the Middle East where we can safely protest against the government. Not to mention the only place where women have equal rights and being gay isn't punishable by imprisonment or death. When Iranians recently protested against the morality police, that was beating women to death for removing their hijab, the government response was to publicly execute protesters as a deterrent, and it worked. My point is that Israel has always just wanted peace. In 1948, when the UN partitioned the land, the Jews said, okay, let's make this work. The Arabs immediately attacked us on all fronts. It's been the same story for 75 years. We're attacked, we win the war. We wait for the next barrage. Still, we've managed to achieve peace with at least some of our neighbors. Let's use Egypt as an example. Egypt attacked Israel in 1948, 1967, and 1973, not including smaller skirmishes along the way. After the war in 1973, Egypt finally decided that it was better for its citizens to live alongside Israel peacefully than to keep trying to eliminate it. For the first time, Egypt recognized Israel's right to exist, and we've had relative peace since. The same thing happened with Jordan, which borders Israel in the east. They attacked us numerous times, and peace only happened after we beat them so badly. They decided it was better for their citizens to recognize Israel and live alongside it than to keep attacking us. There are a lot of words and narratives tossed around about the existing conflict that are simply not true. For example, Israel does not occupy Gaza. I've said that multiple times in this episode, but it continues to be said. Hasn't since 2005. In fact, there's not a single Jew or Israeli in Gaza except those held hostage still right now. And in 2005, Israel pulled out of Gaza and forcibly removed about 9,000 Jews who were living there at the time. We turned it over to Palestinians and offered to supply them with whatever they needed to begin thriving, to build a thriving state. There was no siege, no occupation. Israel provided Gaza with food, electricity, money, and continued to do so till about 3 weeks ago. The Palestinians elected Hamas to govern Gaza. Hamas immediately started a bloody civil war in which it eliminated and annihilated all its political opponents, whom were Palestinian, by the way, and has held power ever since. Hamas' mission isn't for interpretation. There's no wishy-washy about it. They're very straightforward about what they want to do. They have a charter, which you can read online, and that its preamble states this: Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before it. This is just one of the many places where they make it clear that their goal is to eliminate Israel and the Jews. Nothing about creating a thriving Palestinian state, which we talked about in previous. Since Hamas fully took control of Gaza in 2007, it has been nothing but violence. Hamas has openly declared war on Israel and the Jews and has spent the last 16 years solely focused on killing as many of us as possible. Gaza receives hundreds of millions of dollars in aid each year and has received billions of dollars since Hamas took over and has nothing to show for it. That's simply because Hamas doesn't use the money to build infrastructure or schools or parks or art centers or anything that you'd expect a government to provide its citizens. Instead, it uses all of its money to build weapons and tunnels in order to carry out a stated purpose of eliminating Israel. That's what I said previous. Hamas is responsible for the health of its citizens, but they don't give two shits about their citizens. It's impossible to negotiate a two-state solution if one side's demand is that the other side is eliminated. In Israel, we've gotten used to living under rocket fire. Every building in Israel has a safe room. No other country in the world would accept those living conditions under constant rocket fire. But we are willing to continue living the way to avoid casualties in Gaza because it's impossible to retaliate against Hamas without killing civilians. This is because Hamas keeps and fires its weapons from residential neighborhoods, including schools and hospitals. Again, I've said that multiple times. It's important to realize those facts when looking at the casualties. This has all been well documented for years. However, after what happened on October 7th, we can no longer live with Hamas on our doorstep. The scale and barbarity of the attack has shaken every single person in Israel, including my cousins. Entire families burned to death in their homes and much worse. After what happened on the 7th, Israelis are almost unanimously agree that Hamas must be removed. Even after the year of protesting the Israeli government, people have come together, unanimously united in hopes to defeat Hamas, to free the Gaza Strip and the Palestinian people, and no longer have to live in threat of being, of wanting to be annihilated and removed from the earth. The question is now, how do you do this with minimal civilian casualties? This is a very difficult problem since, again, Hamas operates within the civilian population. Keep in mind that Israel has a military capability to destroy Hamas from the air. They have the capability to destroy Hamas from the air. If we're really trying to commit genocide, which is a popular trope on the internet, has become popular slogan all around the world, then we could easily flatten Gaza from the sky without a single Israeli soldier being killed. But of course, we absolutely would never consider, or Israel can never consider doing something like that, because unlike Hamas, we value human life. We value human life. For Israel and for the Jews, each life is sacred. There's a saying that comes from Judaism that says, whoever saves a life saves the entire world. More than any other word I've seen, genocide is the one that's been most misused and is the most dangerous. Genocide, the definition of genocide, is the deliberate killing of large amounts of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. The word was invented after World War II to describe what Hitler did to the Jews. It's also Hamas' only stated purpose. On the other hand, no one in Israel wants to, or nor has any intention to destroy the Palestinians, setting aside, of course, the few extremists we identified above. The reason that Israel is sending ground troops into Gaza is to identify Hamas operatives as precisely as possible to try and protect the general population. Many Israeli soldiers will die trying to accomplish this. Furthermore, Israel provides Palestinians with electricity, food, water, medical supplies, treatment, and jobs. Thousands of Palestinians cross into Israel every day to earn wages that are impossible to get in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip. That's because Hamas, the elected government in Gaza, isn't interested in economic growth, minimum wages, or any basic functions that one expects from its government. The average Palestinian lives in poverty, while the leaders of Hamas who work for Iran are incredibly wealthy and live far away in Qatar. I mentioned some stuff about Qatar earlier in this episode. Now, Israel is being accused of genocide for cutting off the electricity to Gaza. In what world is one country obligated to provide electricity to another, let alone when that country is firing rockets and murdering its civilians and its citizens? The Palestinians receive enough aid to build all the power plants they've ever needed, but instead use that money to build rockets. Israel is being accused of genocide because of its siege on Gaza. What about Egypt? They share a border with Gaza and have refused to open it to let any Palestinians into Egypt. Why is that? That's because even Egypt, which is run by the Muslim Brotherhood, wants nothing to do with Hamas. They understand what happens if you let them in and would rather see thousands of Palestinians die than risk letting them cross the border. That is true for the entire Arab world. Israel is portrayed as this big bully against the weak Palestinians, but we are surrounded by 2 billion Muslims. There are only 7 million Jews in Israel. Speaking of genocide, the Arab population in Israel has grown dramatically, accounting for over 20% of the population in Israel, while there are almost no Jews anywhere else in the Middle East. Arabs in Israel receive citizenship, vote, serve in the army, and even in parliament. Jews are not welcomed almost anywhere in the Middle East. Like I said, Palestinians cross into Israel every day to work or receive medical care in Israeli hospitals. Do you know what happens to an Israeli if he were to wander into Gaza? He'd be executed or held hostage. If it was a woman, she'd be raped first. We're the ones committing genocide? I don't understand. I don't understand that claim and that trope. Gaza is a beautiful place. It's absolutely beautiful place with amazing beaches. It can be the Singapore of the Middle East if the Palestinians put in place a government that wants to create instead of destroy. I mentioned that earlier also in the episode. If there was a government that cared more about its people's own well-being than it did hating Jews and Israelis, there would be peace and prosperity for everyone, including the Palestinians now who are drastically suffering. Even now, Israel is blamed for not allowing fuel into Gaza. We're told the hospitals are about to run out of fuel for their generators, yet Hamas has enough fuel to fire hundreds of rockets into Israel every single day. How do you make peace with a quote-unquote government that prioritizes shooting rockets at you over providing medical care for its own people? Again, the question isn't whether they're suffering. Everyone in Israel fully recognizes and the vast majority sympathize with innocent Palestinians in Gaza, but rather who is to blame? Who is to blame and how do we fix it? If Hamas is removed and rockets stop flying in from Gaza, not a single Israeli bullet will be aimed at Gaza. Israel would continue as it has for years, providing Palestinians with whatever they need to rebuild, and we gladly help them create a paradise in Gaza that they can rule however they see fit, so as long as they do so peacefully. Keep in mind that women still wouldn't have any rights and homosexuality would still be illegal, just like it is in the rest of the Middle East, but that's their prerogative. Finally, anti-Semitic rhetoric has sprung up around the world. I found it both eye-opening and terrifying. Me and my cousin Josh really spoke about that in episode 200, and episode 196 also covers some of these topics. There were celebratory marches all around the world immediately after attacks of October 7th, before the fires in southern Israel were out, and well before Israel responded. There were not rallies in support of Palestinians, but rallies celebrating murder, rape, and destruction. How does removing images of children held hostage in Palestine, we're seeing this all over the world. How does chanting gas to Jews in Sydney help the Palestinians? How does burning Israeli flags at Tulane or calling for violence against Hillel at Cornell help the Palestinians? How does it help? Tell me. The anti-Semitism that we've heard about our entire lives, from grandparents who survived or fled the Holocaust, which we always felt only existed in fringe pockets of Western society like the KKK or other really awful hate groups, has surfaced in a way that I would have never thought even possible just a month ago. It only reinforces our belief that we cannot exist without the state of Israel, because it's the only place where we are unconditionally welcome, the only army that will defend us, and while neither Israeli society nor its government are perfect, we share and fight for Western values, and all we've ever wanted was to live in peace.